Homage to My Hair by Lucille Clifton. When I jump up and dance, I hear the music. My God, I'm talking about my nappy hair. She is a challenge to your hand, black man. She is as tasty on your tongue as good greens, black man. She can touch your mind with her electric fingers, and the grayer she do get, good God, the blacker she do be. So the Black Power movement had gained a substantial following and even a larger number of sympathizers by 1969. 1 year earlier, in a speech that launched a cultural revolution, Stokely Carmichael invoked the words Black Power. For lack of any other cohesive nationalist movement, all things that fell under the general heading of Black Pride came to be attributed by the media, white America, and other blacks to the work of the organization called the Black Panthers. So while the Panthers were actually more concerned with Head Start programs and challenging legal injustices, there was a growing legion of primarily young black Americans who were throwing their hair in emulation of the Panthers and as a declaration of their racial pride. The ideological shifts signaled by the Afro were not solely about loving a black aesthetic. It was just a look early on. It was a lot more political, and there was some expectation toward your behavior, particularly your behavior toward other black people, women, your brother, stresses Rochelle Nichols Solomon, Philadelphia education reformer and founding member of the community group Sisters Remember Malcolm. Don't Even Pretend, the Saturn poem by Peter Harris. Saturn's rings was all nappy, spread out from her head like she just woke up, took a shower, and ain't dried them yet. Dreadlocks cluttered with moons, meteors, mysteries. So God, she said, girl, now you know I can't let you be orbiting around me looking like that. Suppose we have company. What they gonna think of me? God took off from work, unscrewed her afro sheen jar, washed her comb and pick, sat under constellations, and told Saturn to sit on the space between her legs. Honey, I got to plait your rings even if I miss a day's pay. So God got to cornrowing Saturn's rings. Ain't nothing more coaxing than God's hand spreading each ring into 3 strands, sifting through rocks that was worlds eons ago. She finger afro sheen down the part, softening scalp, loosening crusty moon stuck in orbit. She start humming Nina Simone while threading wisdom down each row. Here comes the sun, little darling, here comes the sun. Hands so knowing, they tug, twist, twirl those knotty rings, and Saturn don't whine, just listen to the lyrics and feel tight lightness creeping along her scalp, down her back into infinity. Saturn close her eyes and feel peaceful, like when God rubbed her palms for the 6th time and rolled rings from the swirls in the fingerprints of each hand. Here comes the sun, little darling, here comes the sun. I'm not going on American Idol, don't y'all worry. God weaved bright beads, baubles and shells, yellow curves, purple swoops, blue loops, decorate the arc spreading now like the stiff necklaces around the throats of Maasai sisters. There, child, I'm finished. My, you look like a magic pinwheel gracing space. Here, look in my corona and see how pretty you are. God, hum and sigh, she got to rest these few more hours, work again tomorrow, smiling early from the east, glinting off Saturn's rings like a fawn darting quenched from a waterhole back into the forest. The Growing Politics of Hair, 1971 to
1979. In March 1971, the one-year-old black women's magazine's Essence hit the newsstands with its first ever cover model with long, straight hair. Its past issues had all featured afroed or cornrowed cover subjects. The model's name was Lauren Walker, and she was not a professional model, but instead a new breed, one of the many up-and-coming business-minded women of the future. Walker's professed business-mindedness in a youth and popular culture that had just recently invested the bulk of its interest in revolution was as startling as her hairstyle. But by 1971, the Black Power movement was losing momentum, and black hair's natural reign was undergoing a change. The afro had become a hairstyle, plain and simple. It was no longer a matter of what your fro stood for, but how high your fro stood. Afros were everywhere, and they were increasingly unconnected to black power. Younger adults who were coming of age after the civil rights movement began wearing the style in emulation of celebrities like Jimi Hendrix rather than activists like Angela Davis. The Jackson Five, a group few would argue were pushing any type of subversive political agenda, had mile-high fros. Diana Ross, the epitome of mainstream appeal, even sported a short bush. So white people now used to the style that had shocked them just a few short years before were beginning to co-opt it. And blacks now used to the style and increasingly forgetful of its ideological meanings were like whites reinterpreting it simply as a hairstyle that could be worn today and gone tomorrow. White America became more at ease with the sight of a large afro at roughly the same time that the Black Power movement was losing most of its steam. Internal dissonance caused or exacerbated by government sabotage, as well as trumped-up criminal charges and government-endorsed acts of terrorism led by the Black Panthers and similar militant groups to fall apart. Many who had been part of the Black Power movement abandoned it. The cause died, notes Stephanie Williams, a former Panther sympathizer whose own afro had been inspired by H. Rap Brown. The afro became a fashion statement. So now there's big money in black hair, 1900 to 1950. The turn of the century ushered in the birth of a black middle class with cash to spend. As blacks migrated into the cities, both black and white entrepreneurs created goods and services to exploit this growing market. Black men and women were finally provided with commercial hair products instead of having to rely on homemade and often ineffectual concoctions. These products, however, were mostly tins of grease and magic potions, proportioned to turn short, kinky hair into long, straight, shiny locks. At the beginning of the century, most manufacturers of these products were white and did not succeed in turning a great profit, mainly because the products were both marketed ineffectively and never lived up to their hyperbolic claims. But things changed rather quickly, and black people rolled up their sleeves and once again reclaimed their hair industry. But this time, it was their own hair that caused profits to soar. So politically incorrect, black hair's new attitude 1980 through 1994. What Farrah Fawcett did for the cascading mane, Bo Derek is doing for braids, Newsweek magazine proclaimed in 1980. Ironically, the era that began with blacks exploring a new visual aesthetic of natural nappy hair and African-inspired styles ended with a white woman being championed by the mainstream as the embodiment of beauty for wearing one such look. In 1979, Bo Derek made the movie 10, and in it she wore her hair in cornrows with beads on the end, the same style that Cicely Tyson had worn more than a decade earlier. By 1980, on the pages of Time and Newsweek and in the lexicon of the population at large, cornrows had come to be known as bow braids. Even though those mainstream publications that took the time to note the African roots of the style seldom included photos of black women wearing them. So some like to point to Bo Derek as an example of America's embracing a multicultural, more inclusive beauty ideal. The response was not favorable. On all fronts, however, the African American community and black women in particular saw it as an adding insult to injury. I saw danger in Bo Derek, remembers Miss Magazine's Marcia Gillespie. What offended me was that it was bad enough that they were going to tell me that she was the most beautiful woman in the world, but then to put her in cornrows as if to cover all of the bases. So, under attack in the braids in the workplace. While white women were getting braids for prices way below market value from black women on the beaches of Caribbean islands or paying big bucks at expensive salons around the United States, black women began making headlines of their own over braided styles. However, the reasons and in their implications were altogether different. In 1981, Renee Rogers, a ticket agent for American Airlines, was fired for wearing cornrows, and she filed a discrimination suit that eventually went to the federal courts. Judge Abraham D. Sofar, the Federal District Court of New York, rejected her argument that the style evoked her African heritage, observing that she adopted the style shortly after the release of the film 10. Following Rogers' case, African American women continue to be reprimanded or dismissed from work over their decision to wear cornrows and braids. Other employers who prohibited braids in general or cornrows in particular included the Atlanta Urban League, Howard University Hospital. American Airlines, the director of corporate relations at the time, said that the braids were inconsistent with the airline's business-like, clean, fresh image, and the Metropolitan Police Department in Washington, D.C. In June of 1987, a string of cases involved the issue began bringing national attention and even gaining the support of some unlikely allies. In 1987, Pamela Walker, a full-time teacher and doctoral student in the University of Illinois at Chicago, who worked part-time at the Chicago Regency Hyatt, was fired when she arrived at work with cornrows. After Walker filed a complaint in the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, the hotel offered to reinstate her. 6 months later, in January 1988, the Marriott Hotel in downtown Washington, D.C., sent home part-time employee Pamela Mitchell because of her extreme cornrowed hairstyle. The 25-year-old who filed a complaint with the District of Columbia, Columbia's Office of Human Rights, gained national attention and even appeared on CBS this morning to discuss her situation. On the show, Mitchell said that her employer had a discriminatory as well as a fashion problem. The case grabbed the attention of the media as well as the support of Jesse Jackson when a candidate for the Democratic presidential nomination and actress and former braid wearer Bo Derek. The Marriott Hotel reviewed the case and welcomed Mitchell back to her position, having decided that her style was acceptable. The hotel maintained, however, that even though Mitchell's hair was neat and unadorned, other cases involving other kinds of cornrows might not be acceptable. So I'm going to stop right there, and I would like to really thank you all for coming. This book really inspired the culture, and it tells a significant and unique story through the culture and history of hair. So thank you very much.
And if I could add one thing, I spent the weekend in Washington, D.C., and it is hard to find hairstyle that is not dreadlocks. Everybody you see on the street, men and women, both are wearing locks, braids, all sorts of things. It's hard to find people who don't have that, so I think it's really interesting.
It is. It really is. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks to all of you for coming. Yes.